Hey everyone, it's Stephanie over at Flyleaf with Kim Leppert at Flyleaf and Allie Martin at Flyleaf. And it's Flyleaf Talks About Stuff where we get to talk about the things that we want to talk about. Hey.
Hi.
Nice to have you back from vacation, Kim.
Thank you very much. It was fun. I had a good time. It was nice to get away. But it's nice to be back because I've missed you terribly.
We missed you too, but it's such a reminder of how important self-care is, right?
Yeah, it is.
Getting a way to decompress. What are we talking about today, girls?
I'm waiting for Allie.
Am I saying it or are you?
You can say it.
Okay, a secondary traumatization.
Ooh, that sounds fancy.
So why don't you explain what that is, Lulu? I mean, Kim Leppert.
You can call me Lulu. It's okay.
It's Lulu Leppert here.
That's out of the bag. I'm Lulu Leppert. So it's
Hold on. Just striking me as funny today. I don't know why.
Well, a secondary trauma is when you've experienced symptoms of PTSD, but you haven't actually experienced the trauma yourself. It's from viewing things over and over again that are traumatic, or hearing stories of other people's trauma that feels traumatic for you. And it's that you haven't experienced it, but you feel all of those emotions of fear, and you feel all of those emotions of all those little triggers that come up for you, and all of those visceral feelings that come up when your fight or flight starts to kick in.
Also known as vicarious trauma.
Right.
Also correct.
Right. And the first criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, the very first criteria is to either have experienced or yourself or through somebody else's experience a trauma that, or an event that is a life-threatening event or a physically threatening event. And so previously PTSD was only diagnosed as if it happened to you. And then recently they've added in the last few years the piece that you can experience it vicariously through either viewing it happening to somebody else or hearing stories over and over again.
I'm so glad they added that too. I'm not sure how much time has passed between the DSM-4TR and the 5, which is when that edit happened.
Right.
But in the days of just media and everything being accessible, streaming, live streaming, all kinds of stuff, it would make sense why this is a necessary change.
Yeah.
And I think that was really evident if you're old enough to remember, if you guys are old enough to remember 9/11 when it happened, that we actually watched this whole thing play out in front of our eyes. And not only did we see it happening live, we saw people taking their own lives live.
Yes.
We saw people just completely, it was just the most devastating thing to see live. And so to see it as it happened was one thing, but what ended up happening was that the media played things over and over and over again. And things started to get played on the internet over and over and over again. And for me, that was the first event that I can remember being something that I had to stop watching because it was too much. And I know that there were probably other ones, but for me, that was the most impactful one that I had to actually put that down and not look at anymore because it was just too traumatic to continue to watch it.
I totally agree with you. And like the people ending their own lives out of a state of desperation, that stuck with me forever. Like,
yeah.
But I can go back to the Challenger, right? When the Challenger exploded,
I remember
watching that on as it was happening, because I was home from school that day because I was sick, and I was
we watched it in my classroom.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah,
and then watching everybody talking about it and watching it again with the highlights and stuff. Not nearly as much as it was with 9/11, clearly with the advancement of technology, but absolutely.
I remember we went to a training in Charlotte, and it was sponsored. It was a trauma training, and it was sponsored in part by River Oaks Hospital in New Orleans. And one of the presenters there, he was called by the news media when 9/11 was happening, and they were asking, what is it that we need to be doing? What is it that we need to be doing? And he said, turn it off. And that stood out to me because I was young. I was in 8th grade when the teachers just played that stuff all day. And I remember, I don't know if they still do it anymore, but every September 11th, some news stations would air what their coverage was from 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern through the end of the day, as if it was just live happening again. And, I guess it's a way to honor history, but it's also a way of just like sending so many people back to that place in time and stirring up a whole bunch of feelings.
I remember that day that my now husband, then we were dating and we weren't married yet. We were watching it together. He had gotten home from work long before I did. But he took, now I'm really dating myself, but a VHS tape and put it in and hit record and just let it record. So we have recording of all of it happening live, and we have this tape, and you can put the little tabs out so you don't erase over it or record over it. And we have never watched it. I mean, now we don't have these, but we never ever went back and watched it, but we have it, and we have it in this box in the attic with some other stuff. And I don't know why we have it.
But we had one too.
Never watched it.
We had one too. It was just like, I think our thought was it was just a form of documentation, documenting our history of our country.
Yeah.
But we never went back and watched it. We still have it too, on a VHS tape, by the way. So.
And we never expected it to be what it was during that day. You never expected what was going to happen. It wasn't like you could predict it. It was just crazy. But the thing about that stood out for me, I was a very young social worker at the time. And I remember hearing about people going to therapy to work through that event. And these people lived in like New Mexico or Oklahoma, and they were nowhere near New York when it happened. And I remember at that time in my head going, what was wrong with you people? You weren't even there. What is your deal? And it took me, education and years to understand what exactly secondary and vicarious trauma was, because I didn't know at the time. I didn't realize that was even really a thing at the time. So for me, it was a big learning experience.
Absolutely. I mean, what we're finding now is that our service members who are in charge of the drone strikes, who are at air bases out of Nevada, I think, they're showing up with PTSD too, and they're not in theater. I don't know if they would consider that theater. They're not on the ground in Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan. Right. They're here, stateside.
Right. Right.
There's I talked about this today too. There was and I'm not going to get into too much detail about this, but I did work with domestic violence offenders for a very long time doing group therapy. And as a young social worker, there was a tape that they used to play us just to train on domestic violence and the impact of domestic violence. And it was a very horrible 911 call where the spouse ends up killing another spouse. And you hear the horror in the voices of the people on this tape. And I heard it a lot when I worked with social services, because it was a training thing that they would play. And then I used it when I did this group with these men to help them understand the impact of it. For me, it got to where every time it came time to play that, I had to leave. I got to where I couldn't listen to it anymore. I'd heard it. It didn't desensitize me to it. It hurt to listen to it. Yeah. And I think that's one of those things that we don't, as healing people and healing professions and first responder professions, we think that we get immune to that, but we don't.
No, because there'll be sometimes if we're like just trying to staff a case or try to understand something or just like share some of the stories that we've heard as therapists, where it could, potentially leave an impact and has left an impact with some of us. Just because we deal with such wounding and such horrific stories that we're really, privileged to hear, and we carry those with everybody. And speaking of service members, I mean, the reluctance, whether it's law enforcement or military, the reluctance to share when they come in with wanting to work through traumas of some of the things that they've experienced and seen, that they're one of the first things we have to let them know is, if whatever you choose to share with me, I'm strong enough to carry. So we can let them know that we're not going to be, secondary trauma with them.
Right. And then self-care, right? I mean, that's how we work through that. What is it that you do at home? I think this was something that our good friend Russ Keeney, who's done a lot of work with secondary trauma, one of the things that he talks about is people in helping professions or like medical professions and people that see kind of traumatic things regularly, that they view the world differently and they feel a very big disconnection from the rest of the world who aren't in those fields. So we do things for self-care that are a little bit different than what other people do. What are some of those things that you do to keep yourself grounded when you're not here or when you're trying not to get into your head?
I know for me, I mean, I do a lot of just like quietness, really focusing on something. I think reaching out. I think that sometimes the use of humor, it could come across as cold or inappropriate, but you know, sometimes it's just a way, and I've seen it across professions that deal with trauma, that somehow you have to be able to reframe it in order to metabolize it.
Yeah.
I used to have this little potted plant that I tended to. It died and it ended up just being a little pot of dirt, and I would just sit there on my patio and just put my fingers in it. And now I walk around barefoot in my backyard just to feel connected with something bigger than myself, outside of myself. So that's really helpful too, just knowing that I'm not alone. I take solace in that. It's almost like a spiritual endeavor for me. But I'm sure some people get that same sense of peace prayerfully in a church or something like that. But mine's just outside in the grass.
And I watch very little news. I get my news and I get it from where I want to get it, but I don't like it to be invaded on me. So I don't keep the news on at home, because I want to choose when and how much of it I consume. But I also don't watch movies that are really like high energy trauma action movies. I won't watch movies about kids being kidnapped. I won't watch movies about people getting killed and murders and that kind of stuff. I watch like Adam Sandler, you know, I watch stupid stuff, because it takes me into just this fantasy place where everything is just happy and stupid, and it doesn't have to be serious. And so I have found that over the years, sometimes I'll watch Disney movies, you know, or I'll watch something different than anything you have to experience in real life. And that's kind of my escape. Or dumb. And thank God for Netflix, because there's 1,000 dumb series on there that, you know, my husband tells me I'm losing brain cells for watching, because it's just so mindless. But for me, it's an escape.
Right. I think music also. Turn off anything else, anything with visuals, and just put on some music, and it just takes you into a different realm.
I have a thought, or we've been talking about first responders, and we've been talking about healers, and we've been talking about medical staff, but what about what's going on right now in the world with just everybody? To some degree, would you argue, or could you argue that everybody's experiencing some level of vicarious or secondary trauma right now?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And it almost seems like there's so many memes about 2020 going around right now, where it's like it just can't just get any worse. But, you know, there's just so many new bad things happening that people have to like deal with, where if you found a way to be resilient and to cope with one hurdle, it feels like there's another one, like this anticipation of just something else bad happening. And there is bad things happening.
Right. Right. And one of the tenets of PTSD is not being able to see a future, right? And having just a question about whether or not there is a future. And I think that there are a lot of people struggling with that too. And that uncertainty. So what can people do every day just to kind of tone that back?
I think staying connected and reaching out to others is imperative. So, because we can get so lost in our own thoughts and our own fears, and then anxieties poke up, and then we get reactive. So I think that staying connected to others, and definitely limiting what you're digesting visually and auditorily, you know, whether it's the news or opinion pieces. I mean, everybody's got an opinion. Sometimes we just got to shut it all off and just trust the self.
That was going to be my suggestion, as far as like being really, really intentional and really, really careful about where we're consuming our news from.
Yeah.
Not saying that we have to politicize it in any kind of way, the right or the left or the center or whatever, but just if this is something that I'm taking in that is harming me right now, why am I taking it to this magnitude, and what do I do with it now that I am feeling pain around it? So going to connect with somebody that might help, you know, me understand this better, understand my own process with it, is really helpful and very necessary, because we can't people by ourselves. We can't do this alone.
Yeah.
No.
I think too, in a world where we don't know, the three of us were talking about this earlier, we don't know what a new normal is going to be, because we're in the midst of a trauma, and in the midst of trauma, you really don't know what the end of the trauma is going to look like. So it's not easy to predict. And we're in a global trauma at this point, and I would gather to say a big T trauma, several. But I think sometimes looking for where you can find normalcy, and where you can find things that you would normally do any day that had nothing to do with quarantine, or, you know, any kind of political issues going on, where you might want to sit down and have a family dinner, or you want to do things that just feel good, put on clothes that feel good, do things that feel normal as you can. I think that's important, not to forget to connect with that.
And I'm always about connecting with nature, going outside and really feeling the elements and just sitting in them for a while. It's very grounding.
Definitely, me too. And it's safe to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of forget for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heavy topic today.
I know, but it's necessary.
Yeah. I mean, it's stuff that we talk about. I mean, we were talking about it earlier today and thought it would be a good topic for our chat, but then it's stuff that we deal with regularly as everybody else is. So it's just a heavy one.
For sure. But I think conversations like this kind of normalize and educate about what trauma is. So that way people who might have this thing going on of compartmentalization or comparison where it's like, well, I don't have it as bad as that person. I wasn't there for 9/11, or I wasn't in Beirut recently, or I'm not in some of these harder hit Corona areas, but yet I'm feeling all of this. Letting them know that it's okay to feel, and it's okay to talk about the fact that you're feeling and get help if you feel like you need it from friends, family, therapy, whoever, just be human right now.
Yeah. I think also knowing when you've seen enough and trying to figure out what that looks like. I remember the Boston bombing videos.
Right.
For you know how you talk about these things that like kind of mark for you, things that you can remember. I can remember that one being the bloodiest. I remember seeing things on those videos that the news was playing over and over again with people's body parts being, gone, and live footage that then became this, cycle footage of people being just in pain and maimed and just seeing it happening, and it was happening over and over and over again. That was one of those that I thought, we all need to stop watching this stuff. We cannot consume it. It's not healthy for us to consume this over and over and over again. There's no way that's healthy.
Right.
No, I think some people so badly want to understand, and they get with this need for information gathering, and the more stuff I can find out, maybe that there's going to be something that's helpful. But
right,
we don't use just the prefrontal part of our brain. We have to soften into the rest of it that is connected with the body that goes enough.
It's the whole nutrition of the brain, right? I mean, we watch our nutrition of what we could eat and consume it within the body, but what are we doing to our minds?
Right. I remember that I had a young lady, very young lady, actually, probably in her 20s, in my office one day, who was afraid to go to, this is all before any of this happened. I mean, this is a couple of years ago, but she was afraid to go to a concert because she was afraid someone's going to start shooting. So she was afraid to go to school because there might be a shooting at school. And then she was just afraid of somebody jumping out of nowhere and attacking her. And she hadn't experienced any of that firsthand. She had some, visceral kind of connection, or not visceral, what's the word? Outside connection. I can't think of the word. But anyway, she had some kind of connection to some certain things, but nothing had happened to her personally. Family members had been present when things happened, but not her. And she was more paralyzed in her fear than even the people that experienced some of those things, which was really I thought that was pretty interesting at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's real stuff.
One of the things that we were talking about too, that we talk about a lot, and we're going back to what you said, where, we don't know what the end is going to look like because we're in it, right? And we don't know what the impact is going to be because we're still trying to figure it out, or we're still in the midst of experiencing it. But one of the things that we had all agreed on was the resilience factor.
Yeah. Our globe has experienced more traumas than we care to. We've experienced plagues, we've experienced wars, we've experienced all kinds of things that have changed the whole landscape of the way that we live. And 100% of the time, we've managed to get back on our feet as a global society.
Right.
And we'll do that again.
For sure.
So
there is no alternative.
Actually.
We gotta figure this one out, y'all.
I'm still stuck on trying to think of that word.
The outside
distal? Like distant or distal?
Like not directly connected, but somehow connected.
Peripheral?
There you go. That's the word. Peripheral. Thank you. Because I
can give that beautiful brain a rest now.
was going to call it secondary trauma. Like
Did you
what
see
we're
the
talking
smoke
about?
coming out of my ears trying to think of the word peripheral? It wasn't working today.
3 o'clock in the morning, you would have been like, peripheral.
I would have been like, I got to type it in there. It's a peripheral. I would have totally been like that.
Yeah.
So be kind to each other. Take care of
Always.
Take care of each other. Have compassion for each other. Everybody has a story and everybody came from somewhere. Might not be your story, but it's theirs and it's real.
Ground in nature. And give your mind a break.
Feed your mind healthy foods.
Absolutely. All right.
Water, why not?
And be in the water, drink water. Water.
Puppy.
I think of anything else. Y'all are so succinct. It's like, drink more water. It's hot out.
And laugh.
And laugh. Find laughter and joy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Until next time.
Right.
See
Wait,
ya.
you gotta know where to find us. Don't disconnect.
We forgot.
You can find us on the internet or interwebs by going to www.flyleafcounseling.com. We are on Facebook by searching for Flyleaf Counseling. We are on Instagram by searching for Flyleaf_counseling. And all of our videos are streamed on Facebook and then they're posted to YouTube. Just search for Flyleaf Counseling.
All right.
There we go.
Perfect.
See ya.
See you on the periphery.